we do strive for this to be a safe space. We want people to feel comfortable sharing their story and their experiences. We want to welcome people's thoughts and perspectives. And so we do ask that we all strive to be mindful and respectful of others. We also want to acknowledge that people are in different places in their understanding of digital mental health. And so we welcome any questions that you have about the space. All right, and so I always start off these presentations with this quick disclaimer / note. There are a lot of digital tools out there for mental health, but really there is no one-size-fits-all solution in this space. And really in mental health in general, it's really up to the end user or the client to really understand and know what their needs and preferences are. And so our job and role is really to present what tools we know are out there and help folks make a better decision in that sense. And so today we'll be talking about goal setting and tracking in mental health, and really what those two things could look like in this space. I think these are two aspects that are really important parts of mental health treatment, but they might not get as much attention as things like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavior therapy, these different modalities that we hear of all the time in the space. But really tracking progress and setting goals are super important in mental health. And in fact, they are a part of these different treatment modalities like CBT and DBT often. And it's also a really important part of a mental health treatment plan, both in the less formal sense for someone who might be accessing an app or who might be trying out other self-help resources, and in a formal sense for someone who might be in formal treatment for mental health issues. Goals are useful for setting a direction. Goal setting is an effective way to motivate yourself and to create change. And in fact, psychologists have found that goal setting exercises are most effective when it's specific and measurable. I see there's quite a few specific and measurable goals in here, right? So having those 30-minute a day or two to three times a week goals are definitely measurable. And that's related to SMART goals, which is something that we'll cover a little later if we have time towards the end of the presentation. But goal setting is also important in relation to treatment planning in mental health. And this is something that working as a clinician is something that I always have to do with my clients, whether it's at the very start of session, depending on how bought in clients are, or over time, collaboratively together, we'll work on setting some goals. So this really helps let you know, both as a clinician and as someone who is receiving mental health services, it helps you know if you're making tangible progress or if maybe you need to switch things up, whether it be the treatment tools that you're trying, or even perhaps like the clinician that you're working with. All right, so so just a few goal setting starters or things questions to start out with. And this was taken from depressioncenter.org, which has actually a lot of great goal setting resources. I'd highly recommend checking them out. But to help figure out what goals to set, some questions that you can ask yourself are: what's important to you? What are your hopes and dreams in a given moment? What would you like to do more of? What does being happy mean to you? I think that's something that we often overlook, is what will ultimately make us happy and live a more fulfilled kind of life. And what is an area of life that you'd like to improve? Again, with goal setting, one of the purposes of goal setting is to improve a certain aspect of what it is that we are doing. And some examples of goal setting tactics from positivepsychology.com, another great resource I recommend checking out, include a handwritten diary or journal tracking. This is something that I do Depending on what it is I'm trying to track, I'll sometimes create like an Excel sheet, which sounds really nerdy, but I'll create like an Excel sheet of things that I want to track, such as my mood, or maybe it's like a certain behavior that I'm trying to curb. Then that's something that I'll do in addition to kind of like the traditional kind of handwritten journals. Using your mobile phone to set daily reminders, countdown apps, those I find particularly useful as well, especially the reminders app on my phone. Motivational notes and posters. I know some folks that like to utilize some of these tactics. So sending around little post-it notes for themselves, just to kind of remind themselves in case they forget about their particular goal. Telling friends and family and joining meetup groups. I think there's a certain amount of accountability in the broader sense here. And I really like the idea of joining or being a part of accountability groups when it comes to goal setting. And I think it's really important to kind of get that social support when it comes to helping us achieve our goals and set those goals. So, all right. So tracking. So we're all likely to have done some form of tracking at some point in our lives, from finances to what we eat to our mood. Tracking in mental health is useful in helping us check in with our goals in treatment. Again, whereas goals can help us line up our treatment, this helps us check in to make sure that we're meeting those different goals. If you're someone who experiences fluctuating moods, for example, again, certain factors like sleep can have a big impact on your mental health. And so you might benefit from using a tracker. Some people might find tracking mood and behavior can also give you more control over managing your mental health. Using non-clinical apps to record habits as well, such as, I know Dailyo is an example here of an app. This can help you kind of understand which things are supporting your mental well-being and which things might actually be doing the opposite, right? So tracking helps identify patterns that might contribute to those mental health changes. So next, I want to introduce Ania Wysocka. She is the founder of Rooted, which is a digital panic button application, which is available for iOS and Android. And just wanted to welcome Ania. Welcome.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so we'll do things a little bit differently today. We'll do a bit of a Q&A style, and I'll go ahead and open it up to questions for folks might have for Ania right after we have our quick Q&A to kind of understand a bit more about Rooted, about Ania and her journey, and sort of the different sort of tracking features that are within Rooted as well. And so, all right, so I was doing some research before today, Ania, and I really just fascinated by all the different stories and sort of the different experiences you had growing up. And it sounds like one of those was you moved around quite a bit.
I did, yes. Yeah, I was
cool.
born in Canada. Oh, I was born in Canada, but I ended up doing middle school in Poland and high school in South Korea. And then I came back to Canada, to a total different part of Canada I'd never been to go to university.
Oh, wow. That is definitely a lot of moving, a lot more than I can relate to. Were there any things from that sort of experience and sort of those different experiences that you had that kind of may have influenced some of your founding and creation of Rooted?
Yeah, I think so. I think while you're experiencing moving around a lot when you're younger and little, it's very difficult. But overall, when I look back, I realize that it really helped me learn how to communicate with a really wide range of people. And I ended up studying international relations, which has a strong focus on also writing and communicating and relations. And I think that when reading the user reviews for Rooted, a lot of people are really grateful of how the concepts are presented and how they're explained in a much more friendly and familiar way than they have heard it from their doctor or even sometimes their therapist. So I do think that that contributed to the language within the app.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's great to have sort of that input and even the development from someone like who is non-clinical or who might not be so like embedded, so to speak, within the clinical space, because I think it's often very jargony otherwise, at least from my experience personally as well. I'm guilty of it. I definitely use a lot of jargony clinical terms every now and then. And so can you share a little bit about how you came to found and create Rooted, and sort of what led you to do so?
Yeah, so I was in my 4th year of university when I experienced my first panic attack, and it really hit me out of nowhere. I had no good understanding of what panic attacks really were. I had never considered myself an overly anxious person. So for me, it was really challenging. It ended up being really debilitating. My doctor at the time just told me, you're okay. And so then I was like, if I'm okay, then what's going on? And it kind of fueled more of the anxiety. And so because I couldn't find that support, I was also limited financially. I was a student on student loans. I didn't have any family nearby. So I really took to studying and doing a lot of research. I found the work of Dr. Claire Weeks, who is one of the first people to kind of say, this is not a uncurable condition. This is definitely something that people can manage and live with. And that just brought me so much hope. So I studied a lot of her work as well as cognitive behavioral therapy. And, just maybe being a millennial, I just thought this should definitely be an app, because there I was lugging around all these books around campus and I didn't feel comfortable without them. But then I also knew that, I can't do that forever. And I thought, what do I have on me at all times? It's my phone. And when I did turn to my phone for help in the early days of getting panic attacks, I just couldn't find anything quite like Rooted. At the time, there's a lot of hypnosis apps or much more medical apps, which weren't really that comforting. Didn't provide that comforting message I needed.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's great to hear that this app and this really this tool was created out of a need, and even a personal need, right? Like, and to kind of help provide some context for folks who might not be as familiar or might have had personal experience with a panic attack. Can you share a little bit about what it's like going through a panic attack or experiencing one?
Yeah, so it is a little different for everybody, but there are a number of physical as well as physiological and mental symptoms. It can feel, from the physical side, it can feel like your heart's racing, like you might be having a heart attack. You might start getting palpitations, sweating out of nowhere. You kind of feel like you're in the middle of a run, but if you're feeling that all of a sudden from just being seated, it can be quite alarming for you. And on the mental side, you can have a lot of dreaded doomsday type thoughts, like something really horrible is about to happen. You're not sure what. You can feel it in your stomach. You can get blurred vision, a lot of like distrust in yourself, and a lot of doubt, and the height of anxiety, really, of what's to come next. So it is definitely not something I would wish on anyone.
Absolutely. And relatedly, I guess that's having developed Rooted. I know that a lot of the tools in Rooted are specifically geared towards folks who experience panic attacks. Can you tell us a little bit about Rooted and how it works? Maybe what are some of the key features that you have either utilized or are most proud of in Rooted?
Definitely. So when I first launched Rooted, I focused a lot on that panic attack niche, because that's what I was experiencing. So that provides you this relief button that kind of walks you through different techniques in cognitive behavioral therapy. You can either face a panic attack head on, or very understandably, sometimes you just want to feel better, and it will also help you do that. It uses different prompts and it's an interactive tool. So, depending on how you're feeling, you can change the path that you're choosing. There's also a number of different lessons on understanding anxiety, what it is, the physical and mental effects, some of which we just talked about, and lessons on the short term, things you can do to manage anxiety, and then finally in the long term. So, if you're really ready to make those changes in your life, what can you do in the long term? After launching Rooted, I heard from a lot of individuals who have anxiety, but that doesn't necessarily manifest in panic attacks. They found the lessons really familiar, but not as much of a need for that red button. So I ended up adding a number of different tools for users who have more of general anxiety and that feeling, the constant anxious state that doesn't necessarily can manifest in a panic attack. So we added a deep breathing tool. We added active visualization, and that's a little different than meditation in the sense that you're not sitting in silence. It's often really difficult for people who experience anxiety to sit in silence. And we have intrusive thoughts is another one of the kind of symptoms. So it's a visualization, many visualizations that
Mhm.
anchor you in a flow, anchor you in the dialogue of the actual visualization. You have to keep following it and flowing rather than sitting in silence. We also have a journal tool, so you can keep track of your progress and note any moods. And it's all gamified, so you do collect points as you go as well. And we have a check-in tool and a sleeping tool now, actually. We hear from a lot of users that they can't actually sleep very well at night, so we have a number of sleep stories.
Awesome. One of the main features you mentioned is that journal feature. Can you describe it a bit more to folks?
Yeah, so it, unlike or like a regular feature, it will ask you, how are you doing? What are you feeling that day and in that moment? It'll also ask you, however, to note 3 things that you accomplished that day, big or small. And this has to do a bit with the neuroplasticity that was mentioned in the comments and just sort of rearranging our mind to really allow us to see those awesome things about ourselves, because anxiety and panic attacks can have a huge impact on your self-esteem. Personally, for me, I had to change my whole career path when it was happening. I felt very, very down on myself. I was very hard on myself. And so, just the idea that you're still accomplishing little things and getting yourself to be able to acknowledge them and focus on them is huge. So, that's what we do with that portion of the journal tool. We also note when you've had a panic attack and what you were feeling in that moment. And the reason for that is when you're talking to your therapist, it can be really illuminating to see actually when those panic attacks happened and how you're feeling. As an example, you might think, oh my gosh, I've had so many panic attacks since my last visit with my therapist. I'm doing awful. And then when you actually look at Rooted, you see, okay, looks like I had 2 and they were both on Tuesday. And then, your therapist might ask you, what else happens on Tuesday? Okay, looks like I talked to my dad on both of those Tuesdays. Okay, let's talk about your dad. So it kind of provides a bit more structure when, again, you're feeling so bad about yourself, you can kind of forget some of the facts that went into, what happened that day, how are you feeling? So that provides structure for therapists as well. And that was built with therapists in mind.
That's really awesome. That brings up a great point too around sort of how tracking can be used um, in conjunction in therapy, like with a therapist. Is that something that you found like to be common, like as a use of tracking, or at least in particular that tracking feature in the journal?
Yeah, we've heard from therapists basically like thanking us for including that. So that was definitely built with them in mind to start. And then
Awesome.
since then, we've heard from them saying that they are indeed using that with their patients and it is helping. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think just having that ability to kind of go back and then even challenge some of those notions and thinking can be a big plus in treatment. Um, and yeah, I I noticed one of the components in the journal feature is the ability to identify an emotion, um, and so being able to select from a list of emotions and maybe identify which ones you might be experiencing. Um, I guess I'm curious, what was the sort of reason or idea behind that particular component?
Yeah, so that has to do a lot with how when we do have a negative experience or a panic attack, we can often create stories about why that happened, what could have happened, what should have happened. But by really focusing on the emotion we're feeling, we're actually a lot of the times going to get a lot further in exploring why that happened. So by acknowledging, you know, oh, I misspoke when I was public speaking, everyone's going to think I'm uh, dumb, everyone, noticed and so forth. You can kind of think, okay, well, why did I misspeak? I was nervous. And why was I nervous? And kind of getting into those emotions, it provides a lot more focus. And so that's what we hope to accomplish with that feature. And I have also seen that really emphasized in CDT as well.
Awesome, awesome.
Mhm.
And another feature of the app is the ability to sort of review the different statistics that, so things like use of the app, how many entries you made, and I know you mentioned earlier sort of that point system and sort of that gamification. And so from your experience as both a user of the app and as a developer, what are some of the benefits or reasons behind reviewing those personal statistics?
Yeah, so as a user from that perspective, I'd say it's just motivating. I spoke earlier about those small accomplishments, and that is an accomplishment, to sign in, to use the journal, to use the visualizer. Some of the goals listed in the chat were around meditation and stuff. Like those are great goals to have, and just to see that you're doing them is a big boost. And, it doesn't hurt that the guy giving you the boost is this colorful, friendly monster who's cheering you on. So that's definitely from the user side. That's the idea there. And then from the developer side, if we want to, we haven't done this yet, but it's definitely great information for a study if it's aggregate anonymized information, just to see how people are progressing the more they use Rooted. So that's good from
Awesome.
the developer's perspective.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to kind of it's almost like the clinician being able to help track if their treatment's working. It's very similarly the developer being able to track if their tool is working for sure. You had mentioned Ron, I believe, the rooted monster. Could you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah.
Oh,
So thanks there, Micah, too, for the question. Yes, it's Ron. And they are this friendly monster that really just, it's supposed to illustrate anxiety, as I was mentioning the apps that I could find before. When you describe anxiety in this using medical jargon, it can keep that power and retain that kind of formal scariness. And so Ron is an example of, a monster. He's sometimes, he sometimes in the app has a very mean, scary look on his face, and other times he's very fun and eager to learn alongside you. So the idea is to really picture anxiety as not this scary monster, but this friendly, kind of silly monster. It kind of takes a bit of the power away from the anxiety as a monster. That's the idea there.
awesome. Yeah, I like Ron and sort of his illustration. It definitely caught my eye when I was going through the apps and sort of looking for apps to review, and I said, "Oh, what's this cute little guy?" But yeah,
Yeah, and just a comment there actually on the pronouns there. I originally launched Ron as a he, but not feeling extremely strong about it. It was just, that was the name given to him. However, so many users wrote in expressing just different gender identities for Ron. So I thought, you know what, that's awesome. So that's why I said he, they in the end,
yeah.
that's, I love when users can interpret their own meaning from the app and use it as they see fit. So a bit more
Yeah,
background on him.
that's really cool. And yeah, it definitely helps to kind of make Ron your own in a sense, and
Hmm.
just having that ability to in a sense, also even like have that ownership over your anxiety, right? If that's what Ron represents to you. Very cool. Thank you so much for again sharing those different aspects, Anya. Again, looking forward to the next steps for Rooted and seeing where it goes from here. But this is really awesome, and again, wanted to thank you for sharing your time with us. I have a last a couple slides, or one slide actually, really to show um, around some of the digital tools that we've kind of found on One Mind PsyberGuide as well that can be helpful in the space. Just wanted to mention these really quickly. Dailyo is a tool specifically designed for tracking moods, and I think that's pretty much the only feature within the app is tracking these moods and activities. And you can add notes. You can kind of see your stats that way within the app. MoodKit is heavily based on CBT. This offers a variety of tools in CBT, but also, again, it contains a tracking component. With a lot of these apps, actually, the tracking and goal setting piece are components within the actual app itself. I'd say Dailyo is kind of one of the exceptions to that, with being that dedicated kind of app. Happify is also based in CBT and positive psychology. This helps users to it helps users create goals and kind of gives different exercises for clients to use with achieving those specific goals. And there's a variety of tracks, a variety of different psychoeducational materials that folks can access using Happify. And then finally, it's Fabulous. Fabulous has very similar to Happify, kind of a goal setting component to it, and you can kind of track those different pieces as you go. And there's a lot of kind of psychoeducational material as well within the app. So those are some of the apps that we found as well in the space. And again, wanted to send a big thank you to Ania and really taking your time today to share Rooted with us. Yeah, really excited to see what the next steps are in the space.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, John. And thanks to everyone for your questions.